Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double 18 Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Nagishi. Normally at this time, it is a week after the draft, and my co-host, Rashab Shakiri, the Bears YouTuber from his YouTube channel, The Windy City Production, is normally be joining me, but he is busy, unfortunately, tonight. But I cannot tell you how excited I am to bring this guests for tonight. We met about a year ago, a year and a week ago, here in Kansas City, where I'm currently residing. If you remember, last year the draft took place in Kansas City, and I met this guest along with his co-host and a co-partner at a party the night before the draft, and I've followed this man's work for the last several years. And if you are an ardent Chicago Bears fan like Rashab and I are, and if you haven't followed this man's work before, you really, really should. And if you follow this man along with his co-host Brett Coleman on YouTube's The Bootleg Football channel, then you should know my tonight's guest. It is none other than Mr. EJ Snyder, the draft expert. You could find his work again on YouTube's The Bootleg Football with Brett Coleman, and he is also the senior draft analyst with the Windy City Gridiron.com. EJ, good evening, and thank you very much. And I am so excited to have you on a year and a week later. As we met in Kansas City. I hope you had a wonderful time last week with the draft. Taking place exactly a week ago tonight. And, at this time, we already knew the first pick of the draft and, by then the second pick as well. But, EJ, it is an honor to have you. Thank you very much, sir.
Hey, thank you for having patience. I appreciate it. We met last year in Kansas City and said, yeah, we'll absolutely do this. And as things happen in the podcast world, didn't come to pass, but I appreciate the dogged determination. And we get to do it now. And I think, honestly, we'll probably have a little bit more fun with it right now because of what happened last week.
Absolutely. It is amazing what really happened a week ago tonight at this time. And I understand we all knew it was Caleb Williams' draft, and he was going to go number one overall. It's probably the least anticlimactic moment in draft in quite some time. But EJ, let's get in with the Bears. You've covered the Bears for a long time. You've written for Windy City Gridiron. You've done a podcast with Lester Wiltfong, the editor-in-chief, Bill Zimmerman. You've also, have that interaction with the Jacob Infante, who is a young up-and-coming draft analyst with the Windy City Gridiron, who I also had the fortunate to interview 2 weeks ago or so. And let's talk about the Bears 2024 draft. We know it's only 4 picks: Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, and I'm probably going to butcher this guy's name, Kiram Adebayo from Yale, and then Torrey Taylor. I'm sorry, it's 5 picks. And then they trade back into the 5th round and got Austin Booker, who is an edge rusher from University of Kansas, somebody that I'm very familiar with living in this neck of the woods. EJ, let's start with the Caleb Williams. When did you first saw Caleb Williams on tape or in person and thought, my God, this guy is going to be, the first overall pick, and whenever he turns pro, or phenomenal generational talent, that people like to use that term so loosely now. When did you see that in Caleb Williams?
You saw a little bit at Oklahoma, him coming into the game with Oklahoma down, rallying his team against a quality opponent. That was, of course, before he transferred to USC for his last 2 years. But that was probably the spark that probably lit a lot of people's fascination with Caleb, which was, hey, this is a young guy that's showing real, incredible flashes of talent, serious flashes of talent that we don't see from typically people that age or that experience level. That was probably when he sort of flashed on the national scene for people that watch college football. And then, of course, he goes to USC and does, amazing things for a couple of years. And by the time he was done with that run and you summed it all up, it was pretty clear that Caleb Williams was the top quarterback talent in this draft, that the Bears had a need at quarterback and really couldn't afford to pass on him. And that was the stance I took even sort of before the combine. It wasn't super popular at that point.
Yeah.
And I just said, look, they can't afford not to. Here's the thing with Caleb is he is a talent at a position that Chicago has struggled with. And you have to do this. Like there's the rookie contract value. You get a 5-year window of basically cost control at the game's most important position. But beyond that, they've not had a dynamic playmaker at that position as consistent as Caleb in a long time. And look, he's going to face the same struggles that every other quarterback coming into the league faces. Defensive backs are bigger and faster. Defensive coordinators have more rotations and are going to throw more looks at you that you've not seen. All of that. But he has every tool in his bag to succeed as a pro quarterback. And Chicago fans should be deeply excited about this.
Yeah, I am deeply excited as well. The whole discord between the fans who wanted Justin Fields to stay versus Caleb Williams's stands, kind of dominated the whole off season, which it got really, really ugly to some degree. And a lot of the media members, both locally in Chicago as well as those nationally, kind of, doused, poured gasoline into the fire as well. And it was really, really ugly to an extent, though. But listening to ESPN 1000 today, Ryan Poles kind of made it clear that he decided he wanted to make a quarterback change as soon as the season ended. So despite the efforts made by Justin Fields and also the Bears also doing their best to, trying to put together a decent talent around him, especially after his first 2 years in the league has been an unmitigating disaster under Matt Nagy, and then also first year of the rebuild and everything. Where do you, when you look at Caleb, do you look at him and say that's generational talent, or do you look at him and say, generations too generous in that? Go ahead. Sorry about that.
No, generation's a long time. Generation's about 20 years, depending on how you figure it. And we hear the term generational talent at a position pretty much almost every year. So that doesn't add up math-wise. That's okay. I understand that. It's a label like GOAT that people put on players, probably unnecessarily. If we're talking honestly about Caleb, I would say he's the best quarterback prospect in the last 3 years. And that includes some very good quarterback prospects. I would have him ranked at or above all the quarterbacks that came out over the last 3 years. That includes guys like CJ Stroud, who had a phenomenal, historic rookie season.
Right.
This is the kind of talent that we are talking about. And it's not that there are no flaws. It's not that he is, somebody that walks on water. He's a quarterback with a lot of skills, rare ones that you don't see very often. So generational, I don't get caught up too much in that. Is he, a very quality pro prospect that, given a good surrounding cast, which we'll talk about, and, decent coaching, has every chance to succeed in the most difficult league on the planet? He is definitely that.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the things that were being mentioned about Caleb's ability to stretch the field, as we can see here, holding on to the ball like way, way too long. There is a certain legitimate concern there. But with the Shane Waldron taking over as the OC, and reports are that, he seems to have the access to the playbook already, and that have been studying diligently. It kind of speaks as to, Caleb, his dedication and his acknowledgement that the Bears were the team that, that that he was going to. He only took one visit. Of course, that was the Chicago Bears, and that we know a week ago tonight he became a Bear officially. What do you make of the the comments about Caleb Williams already learning Shane Waldron's playbook? Is that some sort of his showing himself a dedication, as well as maybe about Shane Waldron's offense needing a little bit of time to kind of digest and learn?
Well, I think all offenses, when you transfer from one to the other, lots of players, not just quarterbacks, have related that to learning a new language. And it takes a while to learn a new language. You have to build basics, you have to build vocabulary, you have to build skills, you have to build understanding about the structure. And that just takes time. Now, offensive football, when you boil it down, it consists of the same basic concepts. It's kind of like chess. You can learn all the moves in chess in about 20 minutes. You can learn how all the pieces move. Does that mean you're a chess master? No, it means you understand the basics of, in this case, offensive football. Tying those all together is incredibly complex. It's one of the reasons I love this game. And a little bit of extra time is not a bad thing. In terms of Caleb's dedication, everybody that we've talked to that interacts with Caleb, we sat with his offensive line at the pro day. Everybody that's been with this guy in the room said, no, this is the same guy you're getting. Like, this is the same guy that came onto the USC campus the day after he transferred from Oklahoma. He has been 100% the same guy, first in, last out, committed to his teammates. There were reports that he was aloof and didn't talk to his teammates, and his line mates like laughed at that, and they were like, well, that's funny because he comes in and slides and puts his feet up on our desk and eats seeds with us. So like, if he's not talking to us, that's pretty awkward. This is the same guy. Caleb has been the same guy throughout. The reporting of who Caleb is and how he operates has been all over the board. But if you talk to people that actually know him, his trainers, his teammates, people that were at Oklahoma, people that were at USC, everybody down the line goes, no, you're getting a guy that is absolutely committed to football, really smart, loves his teammates, loves interacting with all position groups. Like, he's been consistent in that. And I think he's just kind of like stayed the course. And now, I don't know, history's kind of catching up and going, okay, yeah, this is a guy that is, tremendously talented in football, but also dedicated to football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been hearing stories about his, the time he was around the age of 10. He started, training, focused on becoming the greatest that he can be, and certainly, he's all on and off the field antics has gotten a lot of attention, fair or not, and sometimes very, very negatively. But I think what we've seen, leading up to this draft, listening to Caleb and listening to his teammates and his high school coaches, etc., I think a lot of fans are probably starting to see a different side of Caleb that they weren't hearing, or at least they weren't paying much attention to, because of the off-field stuff about the painting nails and the color of his phone, etc. Somewhat very very homophobic in borderline way, and I just hope that the fans embrace this guy, because there is no question that he is probably not only the most talented rookie quarterback that the Bears have ever had when they drafted him, but unlike the other rookie quarterbacks who've come into this organization, he is in a much better position to succeed, not only with the Bears, but compared to the other number one overall pick, quarterbacks that was taken in the past, like Trevor Lawrence, most recently Bryce Young, Vinny Testaverde, Troy Aikman, David Carr, Sam Bradford, and so on and so on. He is in a much better position to succeed because of the job that Ryan Poles has done. How impressed are you with Ryan Poles' job that he has done, in spite of some of the setbacks he's had, like Larry Ogunjobi medical snafu and trade for Chase Claypool and etc.?
It's funny that you use that word impressed, because the first time I met Ryan was on the field at Shrine Bowl, second day of practices at UNLV. And there was a moment he was watching offensive and defensive line. This is a year ago, Shrine Bowl, the last one in Las Vegas. And there was a moment where he was just sort of walking by himself away from that drill. And I thought, well, if there's ever a time to sort of not interrupt him, this is it. So I walked up to him and introduced myself, and I said, hey, I'm really impressed with your work. And what he had done at that point was trim the roster ferociously and get rid of all of Ryan Pace's contracts. And I mean, all of Ryan Pace's contracts. And that took guts. That took a commitment, knowing that, the next year was not going to be the best place to be as a football team. But it was going to give him a clean slate the year after that. And I could see his commitment from that. And I said, hey, I'm a fan of your work. He said, oh, really? And I said, yeah, no, what you've done is taken some real discipline, and it's what needed to be done. And I'm impressed. We'll see what the rest of it is. And the rest of it is building an offense, like you said, that top picks have not seen. So CJ Stroud had one of the best rookie seasons ever last year. He threw for 4,100 yards with Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, and 11 games of Tank Dell. Caleb is a higher rated prospect, and his skill group is DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, DeAndre Swift, and Cole Kmet. Like, if you don't think he can match what CJ did, I think you're probably not looking at it correctly. Now, Bobby Slowick was tremendous in his first year as a play caller. And I don't know that Shane Waldron is the equal of Bobby Slowick, but he is better than Luke Getsy. So if we're talking about realistic expectations for Caleb's first year, I think he can absolutely thrive in that system. It is as soft a landing spot as a rookie quarterback has had in some time. And I'd say, let's say 38 to 4,000 yards, 3,800 to 4,000 yards, 20 plus TDs if he stays healthy are absolutely legitimate marks. Like, the 20 TDs would not break the record. The 4,000 yards would. Bears have famously never had, 30 touchdown thrower or a 4,000 yard passing QB. If he breaks one record as a rookie and the Bears are competitive for a playoff spot right up until the end, that is a successful season, because he is simply going to grow on that. We know there are growing pains within a rookie season. All these people that are saying Super Bowl and whatever else, they really need to look at history. They need to look at Justin Herbert, who had the best rookie season on record before CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud's rookie season, like, he took him to the playoffs, but he didn't take him to the Super Bowl. So even if Caleb is a better player, that's still an unrealistic expectation to saddle a rookie with, regardless of the landing spot. A much more competitive football team, an offensively competent football team, all within the realm of possibility, and I believe should be expectations. Everything beyond that, hey, let's give the guy a break and watch how he progresses.
My guest tonight is EJ Snyder, NFL draft expert, one co-host of the YouTube's The Bootleg channel with Brett Coleman. You can find it on YouTube, and you can also find his work on WindyCityGridiron.com. So moving on to from Caleb, the other number one pick. Of course, this is the Bears' number one pick, I should say. It was Rome Odunze taken at number 9, wide receiver out of University of Washington. And when did you saw Rome Odunze and thought this guy could be a game changer for whoever it is? And how excited were you that Odunze was still available at number 9 when the Bears took him?
First question, that was last year. His season at Washington, he had a true breakout season. I went to Washington's Pro Day last year. And of course, he wasn't participating in that. Everybody else was on the field and everybody was working out, and there was an assemblage of, agents and press and family, all the folks that are at pro days. And Rome walked in because a lot of times, current teammates come to support their guys who are headed to the draft and imagine themselves out on that field next year, working out for scouts. And when Rome walked in, there were probably 75, 80 people in the corner I was in, and like a whisper went through the crowd, like, Rome's here. Hey, Rome. And like all the heads were turning from the action on the field to look at this, 6'2", 6'3" guy with blonde cornrows. And he was already that guy last year. So, and then he goes out this year, reproduces that year with Michael Penix, takes them, all the way to the national championship. And the sort of depth of his skill became very, very obvious. And I was ecstatic to answer your second question. Rome Odunze was my top choice at 9. I did not believe he would be there. He is a quality football player that I think has one of the best chances of succeeding of any player in this draft, regardless of position. And because of that, I was almost positive that some team before the Bears would just go, look, we can't miss with our first round pick. We're just going to take him.
I was too. I thought
and they
Atlanta was going to trade out or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the fact that he was available and fell to the Bears, and that, Ryan Poles felt similarly. He had said, like, I thought about trading up for this guy. If he was there was no question. We weren't trading the pick. We were taking this guy. There's some guys you just don't pass on. Those are all sentiments that I, echoed moving up to the draft. And 3-4 weeks before the draft, I was like, look, my hierarchy is Rome. If Rome's not there, look at a trade back and then some other players. But if Rome's there, you don't do anything. You just take Rome Odunze. And they did. And I couldn't have been more thrilled.
How did you rank the top 3 receivers? So you had the Rome at number 1, and then Marvin Harrison 2, Malik Neighbors 3. Is that the correct order you had them?
I did. I had them in that order. I had them all in the same tier. I tend to think tier is more important than particular order, because a lot of times, like, those are 3 excellent receivers, and I should be clear that I think all 3 of those receivers are going to be very successful pros early on. Like, I don't think those guys are going to have hiccups or sophomore slumps or anything else. I think those guys are going to be productive receivers from day one. It comes down to a flavor of what do we want, because they are not the same player. But yes, I had Rome 1, Marvin 2 by a very thin margin, and then Neighbors 3. But look, if you're looking for the most explosive receiver in this class, I think that's Malik Neighbors. If you're looking for the best sort of slot Z hybrid, I think that's Marvin Harrison. And if you're looking for the best X all around, again, the comparison I made was Larry Fitzgerald coming out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Fitzgerald, going to the Hall of Fame. And when I said that early on about Rome Odunze, for people that, don't watch a lot of West Coast football or whatever else, they were like, what are you talking about? I was like, no, listen again. It's Larry Fitzgerald coming out of Pittsburgh. It is a very well-rounded skill set from a large athlete who moves extremely well, has a super high contested catch rate up in the 70th percentile. This is a guy that can win anywhere, all over the field, knows how to run routes, is physical, has great size, has great hands. Like, that's Larry Fitzgerald coming out of Pittsburgh. Does it mean that Rome is going to be Larry Fitzgerald in the NFL? It doesn't. There's so many variables that go into that. But in terms of scouting a player and traits, that's the guy he reminds me of, because he is incredibly complete as a wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited. Like you said, I never expected Odunze to last all the way till 9, because a lot of reports were saying that they were actually looking to draft defensive tackle, Byron Murphy, the third of Texas, who I think absolutely would have been a terrific player, and I would have had no problem. And I think a lot of fans would not have any problems if Murphy was taken by the Bears. But I thought number 9, in my opinion, was kind of rich, even though there were reports saying that the Bears and even the Falcons, for that matter, were really, really considered taking him at 8 or number 9. If Rome Odunze was gone, would you have taken, Byron Murphy at number 9?
Murphy was my third choice after a trade down. Again, it takes 2 to trade, and if Rome's gone and nobody wants to move up, I would have been satisfied with Murphy. I think he's a great player. He landed here in the Pacific Northwest with me. He's going to be playing for Mike McDonald and the Hawks. I think he would have been a great 3-tech for the Bears. I would have been satisfied with a trade down of Johnny Newton too. I think he would have been an excellent fit in their defense. But again, my hierarchy was Rome if he's there, trade down for a few extra picks, still within the first round, again, with the possibility of getting a guy like maybe Murphy later or certainly Newton later. That would have been fine by me. If you had to stick and pick, the second player I had on my board was Byron Murphy. So I was completely happy with him. I've seen him live a couple of times over the last couple of years. Very impactful player. I think his best football is still ahead of him.
Sure.
He had his intro press conference with Seattle today. Great dude. Going to be a lot of fun watching him here in the backyard. But look, it was Rome or whatever's left for me.
Yeah. Right. And speaking of whatever doubles left, there were a couple of interesting names also available, thanks to Atlanta taking Michael Penix Jr. at number 8. Dallas Turner was still available. Jared Verse was still available as well. And those were the two names also highly linked to the Bears pretty much throughout the draft. If you had to pick Turner or Verse, or even Latu from UCLA, out of the three, who did you think that the Bears would have chosen out of those three as the edge?
Bears is different. For me, it would have been Latu. I think he's the most skilled edge rusher in this draft. I don't think it's really close. I think Turner has the highest ceiling in terms of physical traits. He's already a very, very good player as well. I think Verse is a very heavy-handed edge, very good run stuffer, and needs to develop some additional, I'll just say, verve as a pass rusher to really, make that high of a selection worth it. And that was really my issue with it. It's like, I like all three of those players as football players, and I actually like the spots they landed in. I all think they landed in very good spots. Yeah. But at 9, it really felt like even Latu, like even after he was cleared from injury, that felt a little rich, and the Bears just really needed pass rush. Shortest line to the passer is interior pass rush, and that's why I landed on Murphy above those three guys.
Mm-hmm. So after the two picks in the top 10, the Bears basically has set out idle the entire draft until their third round pick in the 75th overall. They ended up picking Yale tackle Kieran Amagaje, who happens to be a local kid, Hinsdale Central High School, went to Yale, very smart kid, obviously on and off the field. Had a top 30 visit with the Chicago Bears, and it was kind of a surprising name. I heard it. I saw a little bit snippets of it of him, I think on The Athletic by Dane Brugler. Can you tell me a little bit more about Kieran Amagaje and at number 75? And do you see him maybe as a development prospect, or do you think that the Bears have a few ideas that he might be able to contribute early on if necessary this year?
Well, I think he's going to contribute for sure. I think that's his OT3, and the Bears needed an OT3. If either Braxton Jones or Darnell Wright were going to go down, the tackle depth in Chicago was not great. You can say what you want about Larry Borum, but it is a significant drop off. So there was definitely a chance to upgrade there. They believe that Kieran is that guy. He has incredibly long arms, over 36-inch arms. A lot of people wanted to move him to guard. I think just because of that length and his movement skills, you probably give him his first shot at tackle. I think that's where the Bears are going to play him, as OT3. You say development project, I say sort of quick development project. I think that he could be tooled up pretty quickly and really competing with Braxton Jones for the left tackle spot. I like Braxton Jones. I was not a fan of drafting a tackle to replace him because he is a functional starter. And again, with a better offensive line around him, he's not going to have to do as much. I think he'll show out even better. But I think the Bears hope that Kieran is eventual competition for Braxton. I don't think Darnell Wright's going anywhere. He's been a terrific, he had a terrific rookie season at right tackle. So they needed more depth in that rotation. They got it. It wasn't necessarily the name I was looking at, but I don't dislike the player. The local connection for me is nice. It's really cool that he grew up a hardcore Bears fan. I love that. But in the end, in terms of what I look at, it doesn't really rate in terms of like, oh, he's a local. Like, I don't give him an extra check mark for that. This is a tremendously skilled blocker that has 36-inch arms. Like, those guys don't grow on trees. So the fact that he just happens to be from Hinsdale and love the Bears, that's all the better. Bears needed an OT3. They got one. Right. I thought there were probably some better players available on the board, not necessarily at tackle, just overall at other positions. They chose to address it here. I can't fault them for that because, their next pick was 122, and they were not going to get a tackle at 122 that was as good as Kieran. So they chose to do it then. Again, I'm good with it. Let's see how it works out.
Just out of curiosity, who would you have taken at 75?
It's funny because I had Austin Booker as an option at 75.
Right.
Obviously, he lasted much later on. But
thankfully, yes, he lasted that long.
So there were multiple players I thought were worth it there. There were other defensive tackles. There were a couple other what I classify as defensive ends. So, it was really interesting that he came back around and got Booker so much later. But they did need a tackle, and it was a question of when they were going to take him. Honestly, if Mason McCormick hadn't gone at 73 to the Steelers, that would have been my choice, because I think they also need a sort of all interior backup guy that can play center and guard, because they've had so much attrition at guard. Both their guards missed significant time last year. I love Mason McCormick. I made no bones about that throughout the process. I think he's going to be a tremendous football player. I think he's going to be a great Steeler. I DM'd him on Saturday and said, hey man, I just missed you 2 picks, but I think you're going to look great in black and gold. He was super excited about that. Obviously, Pittsburgh's got a great, history of offensive line play.
Yes.
But so it was two picks later, and I was like, well, the guy that I was really, I was targeting, I think they might have been targeting as well, as off the board. You've got to do something else. You needed both interior help and exterior help on the offensive line, and they thought Kieran fit the bill the best.
Mm-hmm. So after Kieran Amagaje was taken at 75, the Bears had the fourth round pick, at 122. And this is obviously somewhat of a controversial pick in the eyes of some people. They took Iowa mega punter from Australia, Torrin Taylor, at 122. We know there has been Iowa offense has been a running joke around the NCAA this past year. Taylor was the offense because he was able to change the position by himself with his booming leg, and Iowa's defense was able to do the job rather easily because most of the time opponents were pinned inside the 10 or even inside the 5, deep inside of it. I know somebody from the ESPN 1000 or ESPN Chicago said this pick was, this person thought was an arrogant pick because that means that Ryan Poles thinks that basically almost every, not necessarily every hole in the roster, but I think that the roster is set and that is complete. Certainly, if you look at it from this offseason and the draft last week, the rebuilding part of the Chicago Bears is over. Now they're ready to compete. But I think a lot of people were kind of like, flummoxed or flabbergasted, whatever you want to call it, taking a punter, even of his caliber, at the 4th round. EJ, if you want to inject yourself on this punter debate, do you think him being taken by the Bears at 4th round was too rich, or you would have been fine whether it was the Bears or anybody else?
So 2 things here. Tory Taylor is a great football player. Like, punters are football players too. He is a tremendous football player. And I don't want this to come off as any kind of disparagement for his talent, his skill, his value to a football team. You don't take punters in the 4th round. You don't do it. It is indeed an arrogant pick. Even in this draft, where there was a shelf right about there, where there was a talent drop-off, there were other football players who would be more valuable to the football team. And I realize that Ryan Poles and I differ on this, and that's okay. And a lot of Chicago fans, like, Tory Taylor is a new folk hero, and I think that's great. Like, I don't wish for him to come in and be booed or anything else. Again, Tory Taylor is a great football player. I want everybody to understand that. You don't take a punter in the 4th round.
Or even a kicker, for that matter, too, right?
Kicker at least scores points. And some people will say analytically, punters keep points off the board. I understand all the analytical arguments. I get it. You don't take a punter in the 4th round. Ryan Reckow, who's a perfectly fine punter, was a UDFA in this draft. And you could have gotten 2 of the best punters in the nation as UDFAs. Brought him in and said, whichever one of you wins, job's open. Like, you're not competing against anybody. Everybody knew that Gil was gone. So, like, it's an open competition that's rare in the NFL. And you basically say, look, if you come in here and kick well, it's your job. You can still get that for free in draft capital. And if you're telling me that there are no players available after Tory Taylor was picked that were worth pick 122, we're still talking about a top 150 pick here. This is not after the shelf of talent in this draft, which was really around 150, 175, depending on which position you're talking about. There were a lot of good football players left on the board. There are many great football players that got picked after this that could have helped the Bears, right? So I love Tory Taylor as a player, as a punter. I think he's amazing. I'm not unhappy that he's a Chicago Bear. From a process standpoint, from a draft value standpoint, it was a foolish pick. It doesn't matter whether Tory Taylor plays well or not. I think he will play extremely well. I'm excited about that. It's an important facet of the game. It was not the proper use of resources. You could have got a very similar return for an undrafted free agent or two. You could add competition in camp. You could have got a very similar result. The same? No, not the same. Similar? Yes, very similar.
Now you can see on the highlights that he definitely can boom the leg, and obviously changing the field. At any point during the game, especially late in the game when you're trying to hold a lead and pin the opponent deep inside the 10 or especially even within the 5 yards, certainly does have a compelling case for to have a punter of his caliber to be taken. And certainly I'm not upset or angry about the fact that he was taken, whether it's 4th or 5th round. I do hope that the Bears fans will embrace him, and then not to, and like you said, not boo him just because he was taken considerably higher than what many people consider it.
Honestly, if you switch the last two picks, I'm perfectly fine with it. If you take Booker at 122,
Taylor, right?
Yeah, if you take Booker at 122 and then you decide, hey, we need a punter and we love this guy. We think he's the best punter out there by a good margin, and we're going to trade next year's, 4th rounder, 5th rounder, or whatever, and we're going to take a punter this year because we really think this guy is the cherry on top of the sundae. He's going to put us over the top. I'm fine with it, But they didn't. And they got extremely lucky that Booker was there. They were able to trade back in and get a talent like that. So we'll see how it all works out. Again, none of us know. Like, Tory Taylor could punt for the Bears for the next 15 years. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
Right.
Would that make him a value as a 4th round pick? I don't know about value. Make him worth it for sure. But that's a heavy thing. That's like saying, well, he's got to throw for 5,000 yards or he's not worth it. Right. You don't want to set guys up like that. And you didn't really need to. Now they did. This is the way it worked out. He's a Bear. Can't wait to see him rip a couple because guy's got a leg like a cannon.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of Bears fans are from Midwest region, so they're probably familiar with Tory Taylor, who by the way, I typed Torrent Taylor, my mistake there. But they've seen him play, of course, on the Big Ten Network and also on the Saturdays with NBC whenever they face when they were on national television. So this guy is a legit punter, and we'll see how he performs. He certainly has a big leg again, and then he has experience kicking in the cold outdoor weather. So his weapon certainly could be a huge asset, considering how bad Trenton Gale, who unfortunately was a victim of the Taylor's selection, he was released today. So it is his job to lose, and hopefully he will be able to perform from day one. So you mentioned the name of Austin Booker. You would have been okay with Taylor and Booker flip-flopping or switching the draft position. Let's talk about Austin Booker. This is a very intriguing player. He played at Minnesota. I think he was redshirted first year, played at Minnesota briefly, and then he transferred to Kansas. This was his first year with Kansas. I believe he only started one game, and he flashed a lot as a pass rusher. I know some people even compared him to when Max Crosby of the Raiders was drafted, probably around the same area, 4th or 5th round, several years ago when he came out of Eastern Michigan. I know he's very, very raw, and Bears have one player that is somewhat similar. When they drafted the Robinson kid out of Mizzou in 2022, which was Poles' first year. Obviously, Booker's pick might put his position in danger. Tell me about Austin Booker's potential and his rawness, and what he has to do to make himself into like a decent contributor from year one or in moving forward.
Yeah, I think his rawness is probably overstated. A lot of people look at his frame and he's not filled out yet. I think the Max Crosby comparisons as an athlete are a little rich. People tend to forget that Max Crosby was a tremendous athlete in college. He was not necessarily, he was a high effort pass rusher in college, but he was always an elite tier athlete, and folks look for that at edge. It's very important. Booker is a step below that. He is a very good athlete. He is a long athlete. In terms of rawness, he does a lot of things fundamentally on the football field that make me think he's more inexperienced than raw. And that's a fine designation for people that maybe don't know the difference. Raw means you've got just all the physical skill in the world and don't know what you're doing. Inexperienced means you know what you're doing, but you haven't done it a lot. And I think that's closer to Austin Booker. He will snap off nasty long arms, stick the edge. He's extremely long, always seems to be taking a half step less to the passer, which is that's a tremendous pass rusher trait. Plenty of highlights on his tape of diving and taking the quarterback down by the ankles. Again, using that length to his advantage. He can get skinny, get through gaps, penetrate that way. He's got more strength in his frame than you'd think. He'll stand up offensive tackles even at his size. I think a lot of people just sort of judge a book by his cover, look at him and go, oh, he's skinny, he can't be that tough. Not the case. Needs to be more consistent, but can win inside, can win outside. I really like Booker. I would have been comfortable with him at 75. Now, Bears obviously know a bunch of stuff I don't. Waited until much later, and so did the rest of the league, to be fair. Yeah. But this is a guy that I think can contribute as a situational pass rusher, as a third down specialist, as a part of the NASCAR package, literally from day one. Is he going to rack up sacks at a high rate? I don't know that he is. Is he going to get a lot of pressures? I bet he is, because he is crafty as a pass rusher right now, and he's not some tremendous liability against the run. A lot of times when you take a pass rusher this late, I think this had to do more with immaturity issues that I heard about. I'm not sure what those are. I don't put a lot of stock in them, but if you just look at his physical skills, his testing, and his tape, there's no way he lasts at a premium position till he did in this draft.
The player that I was referring to earlier was Dominique Robinson. My apologies there. And certainly, what Dominique Robinson has done in the NFL certainly may not warrant a spot on the roster spot, and that's why the Bears probably took Booker at 144 by moving back into the draft after they completed their first 4 picks. And I can certainly see flashes of his skills, and even with his inexperiences. I'm sure that the Bears have both Eberflus and the new defensive coordinator / D-line expert Eric Washington is probably as tasked to make sure that the Booker is horned and built into maybe as a pass rush specialist, probably in his first year. EJ, do you see him as an every down player down the road, maybe 2-3 years, or that's yet to be seen at this point?
I mean, it's yet to be seen, but I don't see that as an impossibility given his ability to hang up versus the run right now. Again, you see stuff on tape, the current highlight where he's against Oklahoma State. He's flashing long arms, sticking tackles back on their haunches, not giving up ground, and then basically just kind of snuffing out the run at the point of attack. There's a bunch of that on his tape. It's not random. He has that skill. So is he going to get bigger and stronger? He is. He's certainly not an overaged player by any stretch.
Right.
He's going to continue to fill out in the pros, but you don't see his length and explosion and, quite frankly, just savvy. He has a very good feel for the position in terms of when to go outside, when to go inside, when leverage benefits him. I absolutely see him as an every down possibility, early in his career.
A couple more segments, I should say, with EJ Snyder, the co-host of YouTube's the Bootleg Football channel with Brett Coleman. I am Stephen Nagishi. Rashad Shakiri, my normal guest, is not with us tonight, but hopefully Rashad will be able to catch up on this interview tonight. I wanted to ask you a couple of players that was not picked by the Bears that you thought, okay, maybe he would have been a great fit with the Bears. One of the guys I was kind of interested was the kid from Miami, Leonard Taylor III, who was a defensive tackle. I was so shocked that he was actually undrafted free agent. He signed with the Jets as a UDFA. Anybody who was not taken or who went taken by the Bear or by non-Chicago Bears team that you thought, man, he should have been a Bear, or at least you thought he would have been a great fit with the Bears?
Yeah, there's a lot. And the draft is always like that, right? It's one of the fascinating times when, before draft day, they're all in the college pool. After draft day, they have their, pro allegiances or their draft spots at least. I talked about Mason McCormick going to the Steelers. He went a couple picks before the Bears pick in the 70s. I think he's going to be a great player. Would have been very good for the Bears. You talked about Leonard Taylor. I too was surprised he wasn't drafted. Jets had a really good haul on the defensive line with UDFAs. I think they really bolstered their team there. In terms of other guys that were drafted, Caleb's receiver at USC, Taj Washington, ended up being drafted by Miami. I know that Caleb would have loved to have him in Chicago.
That's true.
And Malik Washington, who was also drafted by Miami, the leading receiver in the ACC last year from Virginia, who we saw at the Shrine Bowl. Tough slot guy, 5'9", 200, plays like a running back, extremely good at all three levels of the field, high contested catch rate, even though he's not the tallest guy. Love Malik Washington. There's a bunch of running backs I think could have helped. Again, the running back room in Chicago is pretty well set, but when you're getting down into that 6th, 7th round area where they didn't have any picks, to be fair, there were a lot of talented players available there. Not so many at that point for like offensive tackle, certainly not for edge. There were corners all the way down the board and even undrafted in this draft. I thought were very talented. Again, Chicago pretty well set at corner. I think last year's draft set them up incredibly well with Tyreek Stevenson, bringing back Jalen Johnson. Like they just didn't, Kyler Gordon's playing well in the slot. They just didn't really have a spot for extra corners, but there's a lot of talent there. Jordan Travis is a player that I think would have been really interesting to bring into Chicago. He ended up going a little bit later than I thought he would. It's always good to have a backup. They go out and get Austin Reed. I'm very excited about that as a UDFA because I liked Reed's tape, but the big hang up with Austin Reed's tape coming out of Western Kentucky was, oh boy, he sees it really well. He anticipates really well. He doesn't have a ton of zip on his arm. Well, strangely enough, he worked out with the exact same quarterback coaches and trainers that Caleb did down in Jacksonville. He trained down in Jacksonville. And we got a chance to talk to those guys after the USC Pro Day. And they said, oh, interestingly enough, like Austin's put on 10 miles an hour of velocity from the time that we started working with him about 6 weeks ago to now. So when he came into the training facility, they had him at like 51, 52 miles an hour. He was up to 61 miles an hour. So if you take Austin Reed's college tape and add 20% more zip to his throws, okay. Like that's legit. So he has a real shot. I think a lot of people are writing him off as a camp arm. He has a real shot to be QB2 on this roster. Caleb would be thrilled with that. They've been working together through the off season. And I think it is, I like his tape a lot. He showed a lot of things that you want from, in this case, a backup quarterback. And if you can add a little zip to that, it's really cool. So always cool to see the UDFA process. Always surprising to see some guys that don't get drafted. I think Leonard Taylor is a great call out there.
Mm-hmm. What about the Bears UDFA? One of the names I'm very intrigued by as somebody who follow Fighting Illini football, as is Rishab Shakiri, who's alumni there. Keith Randolph Jr., who I thought was somebody that would have been taken in this year's draft, but he went undrafted. What do you see in Randolph Jr. and what are your thoughts on and his odds of making the team?
I don't think his odds are great because of the role he plays. I didn't watch him like in terms of an individual effort. Certainly saw the Illinois defense. He didn't really trip the needle for me. There's some other UDFAs in the Bears Hall. Austin, we mentioned. The running back from Howard, I think, is really interesting. Wheeler. He was one of my late cuts on the honorable mentions list for offensive gems. I know his tackle, Aneem Donkwa, who we met at Shrine Bowl, he loved blocking for Elon Wheeler, has kick return potential, which is a whole nother thing with the kick return rule changing.
Right.
That gives him I would say, a wider opening to make this roster a contributor or even be held on the practice squad as a player who has the skills to really contribute under the new kick return rules. So there's some other guys, but I didn't watch Keith.
Okay. I know we discussed this in our email exchange about the things to discuss. Let's do the EJ's favorite pick from each team's draft, not necessarily first rounders, but players from any round from each team that EJ really like. Let's do this in the alphabetical order. Let's start with the Arizona Cardinals. Who is your favorite pick from the Cardinals?
Cardinals had a great draft. Monty Ossenfort killed it again for the second year as GM. He's shown a great flexibility to trade back and add picks, but also pick when there's good players there. Top three were great, but I'm going with Trey Benson. He was my RB1 in this draft. I think he's going to give him an explosive element as their RB2 that's going to make him really dangerous.
Atlanta Falcons, certainly a lot of grief from the Penix pick. Anybody else that they got could redeem?
Yeah, Brandon Dorlus in the fourth is a steal. I did not think he would make it through day two. He did. This is the defensive lineman, defensive end from Oregon. Has great flexibility, can play all the way down to the 1 tech, but also all the way out to the 5 or 6 tech. Very athletic, very productive. I didn't think he'd be there for them. Good pick by Atlanta.
Baltimore Ravens, as usual, Eric DeCosta and company, they keep having great drafts. Who's your favorite there?
I really like the Roger Rosengarten pick. I think he's going to be their right tackle for a long time. That's the other tackle out of Washington that played with Troy Fatanu. But Adisa Isaac is such a Raven as a defensive end out of Penn State. That was one of those picks that when it happened and you see where he went, you went, oh, of course.
Yeah. There are certain players that make you say, yeah, that's that kind of player from that team in particular. Buffalo Bills, obviously, they got Keon Cole. He's getting a lot of headlines with his funny antics on the press conferences. But who's your favorite for Bills pick?
Buffalo had a great draft. We'll just start with that. Brandon Bean and co. with another very solid effort. Cole Bishop was my favorite. He reminds me very much of Micah Hyde as a great two-way player. They have a need at safety. I think he could start right away. And the sort of dark horse there is Edfuan Olafosio, linebacker from Washington. He doesn't have to play right away. He can sit behind their linebacking core, but he is, again, such a Bills linebacker. Great in pass coverage. Love him.
Mm-hmm. The Carolina Panthers, the Bears certainly have fleeced them to the core, and they still owe us the second-round pick from next year. They traded back and forth. They signed a lot of free agents to try to make their team more competitive this year. Who's your favorite Panthers pick?
JT Sanders, the tight end from Texas in the fourth, is highway robbery. He is a tremendous threat down the seam. I did not expect him to be there on day 3. He is. Expect some explosive plays between him and Bryce Young in his rookie season. Again, getting loose down the seam. He is a mismatch, extremely athletic.
And the Bears, out of the 4, who's your favorite pick?
Oh, that's great. I mean, obviously Caleb, but between Caleb and Rome, it's very, very difficult. If the Bears already had a quarterback, Rome would easily be my favorite pick. It's a toss-up, but look, when you need a quarterback, you got to have one, and Caleb is a great choice.
Mm-hmm. The Bengals, who's your favorite pick?
It's a high-risk draft, but Marius Mims' potential at left tackle is almost unlimited. Again, more inexperienced, not necessarily raw, did not have a ton of snaps, but he's not raw. And the things you see him do on tape, there's very few humans on earth that can do that. So he's the one at the top. Eric All, the tight end from Iowa, who started out at Michigan, is a sneaky good ad in the fourth. He's kind of like JT Sanders light in terms of a seam ripper.
Sticking with the Ohio theme here, Cleveland Browns, same AFC North rival. Who was your favorite pick for the Browns?
Zach Zinner, the Michigan lineman on that offensive line, is just going to be a fit like hand in glove. I know Callahan's moved on as the offensive line coach, but I think Zach Zinner is going to be one of those guys that sits for a little bit, comes in when there's an injury, and just never leaves the field.
No other team had a rougher offseason than the Dallas Cowboys so far this year. I don't know if this draft redeemed their offseason by any stretch. Who's your favorite Cowboy pick?
Cooper Beebe, the guard from Kansas State, guy that played close to you. He's going to play so well there for a long time. He's such a Cowboys pick. Very, very talented player in this draft. I felt like kind of got lost in the wash because he didn't necessarily have a ton of versatility, but as a guard, easily one of the top players in this draft.
The Broncos at least got their quarterback in Bo Nix at 12, I believe, at number 12. But who is your favorite pick for the Broncos?
The pair of fifth rounders, Chris Abrams-Drain, the quarterback from Missouri, and Audric Estime is going to pay serious dividends on both sides of the ball for them for a long time. That is a haul in the fifth round, both very talented players.
The Lions have done a very good job rebuilding under Brad Holmes. Part of it is obviously because they have been exceptional during the draft. I kind of think that this year was also no exception. Who's your favorite Lions pick?
Terrion Arnold still being on the board at 24 was an absolute gift. He was basically 1A, 1B with Quinyon Mitchell, who we're going to talk about in a second. The fact that they needed a corner and got one of that quality late in the 20s, great pick for Detroit. I don't like those ones because we're going to have to throw against him for the next however many years, but very talented corner.
Next on the list is the Green Bay Packers, another NFC foe. How do you rate their draft pick, and who's your favorite?
They picked quite a few good players. There's lots to choose from here, but the Javon Bullard addition at safety is one I'm going to wish they didn't get. Incredibly smart player, tenacious, tough, really fast. Very, very intelligent in terms of the way he prepares and knows what's coming. He's going to be tough to throw against in the NFC North.
The Houston Texans, terrific season last year, tremendous turnaround. They have a quarterback of the future, and their team on the rise certainly had a great free agency. Who's your favorite Texans pick?
Kamari Lassiter in Houston, mid-round 2 was an absolute coup for them. He didn't run super fast. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been on the board. Extremely skilled, tenacious corner out of Georgia. He and Derek Stingley are going to make a great combination.
Sticking with the AFC South, the Indianapolis Colts. Who is the favorite pick that you saw Chris Ballard made?
Yeah, Latu, the very first one, falling to them as the first defender was just nice. Sometimes you see a team with a need, they have their borderline, they're just sitting there and they're like, oh, look what happened. The guy we wanted is still there. He was the top guy on our board. Let's go. That's Indianapolis this year.
Another AFC South opponent, Jacksonville Jaguars. Who's your favorite player picked by Trent Baalke?
Jaron Jones from FSU, way down in round 3. It's going to be an absolute dog for them as a nickel safety wherever they play him. They'll probably start him at nickel. Really, really fascinating player. Talked to him down at the Shrine Bowl. He's just wired the correct way. He's going to contribute on all levels of their defense, I would say immediately.
And now the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending world champions. The headliner, of course, is the Xavier Word, of Texas, who set a 40-yard record in the Indianapolis Combine this year. But who's your favorite pick of the Chiefs?
It's funny. I was going back and forth with Craig Stout, who's one of my favorite defensive analysts for the Chiefs. And I told you, Jaden Hicks in the 4th, I'm not going to forgive you for that. Him going to play with Spags. absolutely makes me shiver. They now have a trio of big hitting safeties that Spagnuolo is going to have so much fun with. Jaden Hicks was one of my all-time favorite players in this draft out of Wazoo. Big hitter, but more than that, can cover as well. Sneaky good pick for KC.
New coach, new regime at the Los Angeles Chargers. Who's your favorite player picked by the Chargers?
Strong draft, but I'm going to go way down the board. Kamani Vidal in the 6th and Cornelius Johnson in the 7th. Both very savvy picks. Vidal, a heavy, hard-nosed runner who is one of the most skilled pure runners in this draft. To get him super late was great. And then Cornelius Johnson, of course, Harbaugh has familiarity with him. I really think he was the straw that stirred the drink for Michigan in the passing game. Everybody gave Roman Wilson a lot of attention for those, third down conversions and whatever else. But when they needed a chunk, they went down the sideline to Cornelius Johnson. And I actually think he sort of maps pretty well to the way Nico Collins was when he came out of Michigan, was a little bit underused, but had great physical skill. I think we could see Cornelius Johnson hooking up with Justin Herbert and having a similar rise in the next couple of years.
Staying in Los Angeles, it is the Rams. They had their first round pick for the first time in ages.
Yep.
It's unbelievable. Who's your favorite Rams pick?
It was the other Florida State guy, Braden Fisk. I think he's such a fun fit. With Aaron Donald moving on, he's not Aaron Donald, but he has a lot of the same play style that Aaron Donald does. I think Rams fans are going to love him. Always goes incredibly hard. One of my favorite players in this draft was one of my defensive gems.
The Miami Dolphins. Who's your favorite Dolphins player picked?
Jalen Wright was my favorite because he had so much speed, and he's also one of the best pass blocking running backs in this draft. But getting both the Washingtons, Malik and Taj, later on is the NFL version of grand larceny. Like, McDaniel should not be allowed to have either one of those players, and he got both of them. That is, Miami just absolutely hit a note in this draft, and all three of those players are in perfect harmony with that note.
The Vikings, their headliner, of course, is J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner. But who is your favorite Vikings player?
I actually liked Kyrie Jackson, the Oregon corner who started out at Alabama and was called the most talented corner in that room at Alabama when he was there, which, if you think about the other folks that were there with him, is pretty amazing. Getting that guy in the 3rd is such a fit for what they do. He is long, physical, sticky in coverage. He's going to be a problem for them.
The New England Patriots post Belichick era. How did they do, and who's your favorite player?
May's got to be the choice. They stuck and picked. They got Drake May, their quarterback of the future. But don't sleep on Jaheim Bell, way down in the 7th, the sort of talented H-back out of Florida State, who is going to be, if he's used correctly, very, very impactful and might even be a kickoff return option for them.
Who's your favorite player for the New Orleans Saints?
McKinstry in mid 2 is going to be studied later when he goes off. People are going to be like, wait. How did this guy last the middle of the 2nd round? Very, very talented player. Terry Arnold's running mate from Alabama. Slightly different player, but I would say equally skilled. He was just underneath them in the rankings for cornerback. New Orleans comes away with a great pairing on the outside. I really like Paulson Adebo. NFC South foes are going to see that pairing in their nightmares for a while.
The Giants bypassed the quarterback, took Malik Neighbors. Who's your favorite player for the Giants class?
Really like Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota. Think he kind of, again, just faded a little bit at the end of the draft. People kind of stopped talking about him. He is an excellent player, especially against the pass, but he will also fill the alley from deep, which is what cover 2 is based on, is having that safety fill from, against the run from deep. He will do both extremely well. Nobody threw against him in Minnesota. When they did, he picked it off. It was ugly. And he's going to bring a coverage element to the Giants that they really didn't have.
Staying in New York, the Jets, Joe Douglas's draft. How do you rate them, and who's your favorite?
Interesting draft. And again, I think they did just as well in UDFA as they did in the draft. But I'm going to go back to a guy I talked about earlier. Jordan Travis in the 5th could pay really solid dividends for them. We saw what happened when their quarterback went down last year. It didn't work out. Might not be right away, but I am 100% sure that at some point Jordan Travis is going to contribute for the Jets.
The Las Vegas Raiders. I forgot that should have been ranked a little bit earlier. I should have asked. How do you rate the Raiders draft, and who's your favorite?
Didn't blink once and got one of the top players in the draft at 13. And Brock Bowers, again, was one of my offensive gems. I think he's going to be so much fun paired with their other tight end. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work out. Not exactly sure who's going to play quarterback, but either way, it's going to be fun to watch Brock Bowers in black and silver.
Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman always does his magic with trades and everything. How do you rate Eagles, and who's your favorite player?
It's got to be Quinyon Mitchell for me. One of my favorite defensive players in this draft. My CB1, a guy they needed, a guy that maps very well to a player they had on their roster when he was in top form, Darius Slay. But down the board, Anaya Smith in the 5th and Johnny Wilson in the 6th are sneaky ads that they're going to find a way to use and just torment NFC East foes.
The 49ers picking 31 way bottom. Certainly not a place you can add a premium or impactful players too much. But who do you like in the 49ers draft class?
Pearsall was my favorite, but Malik Mustafa is going to outplay his draft slot. He's going to fit in very, very well in that defense. This is the safety. And I think he was underrated and he landed in a perfect spot.
By the way, I forgot in the alphabetical order, Pittsburgh Steelers should have been ahead of the Eagles. But Steelers, we all know, Justin Fields is a new team there. Mike Thomas is, still the head coach there. Who do you like in the Steelers draft class?
The three-headed monster of Fautanu, Frazier, and McCormick are going to shape Pittsburgh football for a while. They are going to be the core of that offensive line, along with the tackle they picked last year, Broderick Jones. That's going to be a nasty line to deal with in a nasty division. They're going to run over some people.
The Seattle Seahawks, you are very familiar living in that Northwest area. Post Pete Carroll era has begun. Mike McDonald, new head coach. Who is your favorite Seahawks player drafted?
I think it's Byron Murphy III. Playing with Mike McDonald is going to be super fun. We're going to have some fireworks for sure. You look at what they did with lesser drafted players in Baltimore at a similar spot, and you give that guy Byron Murphy. Let's go.
Mm-hmm. The Tampa Bay Bucks certainly winning the NFC South was a surprise. Who do you like in the Bucks draft class this year?
Grant Barton was unexpected. I actually think it's a great pick. But the third round of Tyke Smith, who I consider the best nickel corner in this draft, and Jalen McMillan, who's another Husky receiver, just hit me right in the heart. I thought that was a great round for Tampa Bay.
Mm-hmm. The Tennessee Titans starting over with a new head coaching staff and everything. Who is your favorite Titans draft class out of the players that was picked there?
Right up at the top, J.C. Lathan and Tavondre Sweat back-to-back made this team bigger and tougher on both sides of the line pretty much instantly. Cedric Gray in the 4th round, to me, was a great pick. One of my favorite linebackers in the middle rounds. Again, a position group that was kind of maligned this year, but I think Cedric Gray is one of the good ones.
And finally, the Washington Commanders, new ownership, new coaching staff again. Who is your favorite Commanders draftee?
Washington had an extremely strong first draft for Adam Peters. Was great top to bottom. Indeed, our favorite draft class episode for Bootleg is coming out tomorrow. I'll give you a little teaser. Washington was one of my picks. Too many great picks to name. They really went top to bottom. They didn't miss. Tremendous class that's going to fuel Washington's success.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I cannot believe we went through all 32 teams. It's amazing. And DJ, I really appreciate it. But before we wrap up, I've always wanted to ask you, I think a lot of people know who you are, following social medias and also the Bootleg Football channel that you and Brett Coleman co-host, and is very, very successful. Can you tell me about your background, how you kind of fell into this, role, and how you ended up becoming, like a draft expert that you are today?
Yeah, I would say accidentally. It's just pure curiosity. When I say pure, there's a real purity to it. I just picked up a notebook one day, probably 12, almost 13 years ago now, and said, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know how this happens. It's a fascinating process to me, the NFL draft, but I'm not sure how people, make these designations. I'm not sure what scouts do. I can look at football players and have my whole life and say, I think he's good or I think he's bad, but that felt really hollow to me. So I literally just picked up a notebook one season and started watching whatever game film I could find, which was extremely difficult in those days, and started making notes. And that was it. I literally had a notebook and I would just write notes about players. I didn't have any structure to it. I had no plan to do the entire class or anything else. And I had zero plan, quite frankly, to share it with anybody. I just ended up speaking at a college class couple of weeks ago. I went to my alma mater, and their business program had me in because they were interested in sports business, and they asked me a similar question, and I said, they were like, weren't you worried about monetization? I was like, no, I had no plans to share this with anybody because I didn't have any knowledge. I didn't think I had anything to offer, and in the beginning I really didn't. And I did that for almost 4 years. And every year it got a little bit bigger and a little bit better organized. And I started to make spreadsheets, and I started to, listen and consume more draft content, which was, again, still harder to find in those days. And I started to kind of hone my own voice and make an opinion that I thought was somewhat informed. Now, if you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect in terms of knowing a lot and then realizing you don't know very much and then sort of regaining that stature, I was in the beginning of that curve thinking that I knew something. And I didn't share anything until 3.5 or 4 years in. And even then it was only on message boards. Like somebody said, hey, I think this player can do X skill. And based on what I'd seen, I thought that was the complete opposite. And I thought there was a lot of that going on, and there still is. And I typed a response that said, I don't think so. Like, here's my evidence. Here's mine. What's yours? And of course, you know how message boards are. Everybody was like, ooh, fight, right? And I was like, no, that's not what I'm here for. I'm saying this is what I saw. What did you see that makes you think that? And predictably that person didn't have anything because they hadn't, and they were just kind of throwing out a take, and, people were taking it at face value. And after that, people started asking me, well, what do you think of this player? What do you think of this player? And I was like, I don't know. I haven't watched that player, but I would go and watch that player, and I would try and form an opinion or figure out whatever they were asking me about, does X have good hands, or can Y stop the run, or whatever else. So it really started in message boards. That was on Windy City Gridiron. Finally, I did a fan post, which is anybody can do those. You just put them up and post them. It was about the structure of defense. It was really well received, and I thought that was cool. But again, it was still, I wasn't trying to do anything with it. And then they put out a call for contributors. I submitted a plan for writing a draft column. I didn't hear anything for like 4 months. I submitted it in May. No answer. They hired a couple other people. I thought, okay, well, cool. They picked somebody else. Then in August that year, I was out on a long drive, and I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I pulled over, took the call, said, hey, this is Dane Noble. Do you know who I am? I said, yeah, you're the editor of Windy City Gridiron. He said, could you do that thing? And I was like, what thing? And he said, the proposal you put in like May for the draft column, could you do it? And I was like, God, like nothing for 4 months. And now, yeah. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, that's why I put it in. He goes, cool. Can you have something next week? And I was like, sure. And so I started writing a draft column for Windy City. I wrote 1 the first year. I wrote 2 the next year. And, one thing led to another, and here we are.
Now, you were working a full-time job, and this was
Correct.
kind of like your side gig.
Absolutely.
Out of your favorite, like a hobby,
Mm-hmm.
and then it kind of like outgrew, and then now you do this full-time.
I do. I quit my full-time job that I'd had I've always had a full-time job since I was 16. So it was a bit odd to start working for myself. But I'd been at my last place of employment for 15 years, and it was going fine. And we had set a financial target, Brett and I, for when my time would be more valuable and when it would be tougher to fit things in. When and if Bootleg grew, Bootleg continued to grow. I remember getting out of that particular sponsor meeting and Brett said, was that the number? And I said, yep, that was the number. And he said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I guess I'm going to figure out how to quit because haven't done that in a long time. So started getting things in order. And a couple of months later, quit and did this full time. It's been not quite 2 years, a little over a year and a half at this point. And I run Bootleg Football behind the scenes, and then, do the on-camera stuff that you see as well, and going great guns. So we're still at it.
Where did you meet Brett Coleman?
Oh, that was a good question. Actually, I got a call from Lester Wiltfong, who the now editor of Windy City, has been for a long time, and I was working my day job. I'll never forget. I just took his call on a break, and he said, "Hey, do you want to go to the Senior Bowl?" And I was like, "Yeah, like every draft guy wants to go to the Senior Bowl." And
Absolutely.
he said, "I can get you a credential, but you're going to have to pay everything else yourself. You're going to have to buy your own flights, buy your own hotel, food, whatever. I can just get you in." And I was like, "No problem. I'm going." Like, I hadn't talked to my wife or anything. Came home, said, "Honey, I'm going to Mobile, Alabama in like 3 weeks. I'm going to be there a week. I'm going to take a week of vacation, and we're going to do this." And so that was it. That was that. I mean, that to me was a huge achievement to actually be, not invited, but allowed to go to the Senior Bowl. And I put out a call about a week and a half before I went and said, "Hey, I'm a first timer going to the Senior Bowl. Anybody else a first timer or anybody else that's a vet want to show me the ropes, show me where to eat, like where to pick up my badge, all the regular stuff." And like 15 people replied. A bunch of people were first timers as well. A couple people that I knew were going. A few of the people that I'd come to know in the business, I had a handful of people I knew in the business, like 5 at that point. And 3 of them weren't going that year for either they had stuff going on in their life or other conflicts. So they weren't going to be in Mobile. So my kind of core group of folks I wasn't going to be able to lean on. And one of the people that replied was Brett. And we laugh about this all the time. And I tell people all the time, I knew who he was, but I'd never watched one of his videos before I met him. And so I had like 5 or 6 people that replied, and I said, "Cool, we'll get there. We'll meet up. We'll, go out for beer or something, and we'll figure out, what's next." And Brett came in the day after I did. He called me, and he was also a first timer. He called me up and said, "Hey, I'm here." It was midday on, I think it was Tuesday. And, "Are you hungry?" And I was like, "Yeah." We went to a barbecue place and we sat down and we split a plate of barbecue and we talked for like 3 hours, and we had a couple of beers. And then we were like, "Oh, we got to go." Like the press conference, the opening press conference with Nagy, and it was actually Jalen Hurts, was at that. And we were like, "Okay, like we'll pick this up tomorrow. We'll keep talking, but like we got to go do the press conference." So we went to the press conference. We saw all the people we knew, mostly from online. Again, people I hadn't met in real life, but people whose work I'd followed. Trevor Sikkema was there. Ben Solak was there. Joe Marino was there. Like lots of people I knew. And then we got done with the press conference and he was like, "Well, what are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "Well, I'm going to the weigh-in." He said, "Okay, I'll meet you there." We went to the weigh-in. We ended up interviewing some people just sort of off the cuff. He just stuffed a microphone in my hand and was like, "I'll film, you ask questions." And I was like, "What are we doing?" And it kind of went from there. We kept talking for the rest of the week. And by the end of the week, he said, "We're going to do this." And I said, "Do what?" Because we talked about it a couple times during the week, but like there was no real plan. And he said, "We're going to start a podcast because you know about podcasting and audio and I know about video, and we're going to do it." And I said, "Okay, but don't say that if you're not serious, because I'm going to be at your house in 2 weeks and we're going to map this thing out and we're going to start it." And he was like, "Okay." And so we both went home and told our wives, "Hey, we're going to do another thing." Not very popular conversations at the time. Cause we weren't making, he was making some money. I wasn't making any money off anything that I had done yet. Yeah. And to sort of up the ante and do more at that point was rough. And then COVID kicked off like a month later. We had a captive audience and I did fly down to his house right before COVID set in. And we spent 3 days just whiteboarding the name. We didn't really have the logo yet, but we really talked about our voice and how we wanted to do it. We filmed some testers. Those are the very first videos that are on the Bootleg channel at his kitchen table. And then COVID hit and we're like, "Well, what are we going to do?" And we're like, "Well, we got some time on our hands. We might as well make a podcast." So that was the start of Bootleg in 2020, March of 2020. Wow. And we've been going ever since.
Now, I've asked this question to Jacob Infante as well, who you're
Mm-hmm.
familiar with.
Sure.
Jacob played high school football. He knew very early on he wasn't going to go far, so he kind of like switched to, coaching and scouting aspect of it. Did you and Brett have any experience playing football?
I don't know if Brett played football. I know he didn't play in high school. He's a hockey player. I don't know if he played as a little kid. I played little kid football. We're talking fourth, fifth grade, sixth grade football. Through middle school and high school, I played soccer, basketball, track, and a little bit of baseball.
Yeah.
I didn't play football because I really didn't like our football coach in high school. When I got to college, I was there to play soccer, actually, and I didn't end up playing soccer because, again, I didn't like the coach very much and said, hey, I can't spend this much of my time doing something I don't really want to do.
Right.
But my work study job was at the field house. So I knew all the athletes, and I, was hanging out with football players and baseball players and whatever else. And the football players were like, you should come out for receiver. You can really catch. And we don't have anybody over 6 foot. And so I thought about it. But I actually didn't end up doing it. And one of the guys, strangely enough, on that football team was Eric Williams, who now covers the NFC West for Fox. He lives down in Los Angeles, and I just sort of reunited with him at Caleb's Pro Day because we were always, in the field house together and whatever. But I didn't actually ever play organized football after, I think it was 5th grade. So I played like 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And then I almost played in high school and I almost played in college, but I never did. And then I kind of took a long break from football. I would still watch it, but I didn't have a hardcore rooting interest in football. It was always something I watched and enjoyed, but it was sort of in the background and I was doing other things. And then, later in my life, it sort of came back into prominence and I got this intense curiosity about how does this whole thing work? Like, where do they get the players? What matters? And I just got more and more curious, and that's held true through all this. I am still extremely curious about football. It is still, I would say, ultimately fascinating and complex to me. Yeah. And if that ever stops happening, I imagine I'll stop working on it because it's a hell of a lot of work. But it is still a fascinating exercise to me, the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. So I guess my last question, and you could pretend you're giving an advice to me or anybody who's actually thankfully watching this channel. There's like almost 900 people. Thank you very much for tuning into this Q&A with EJ. Based on your experiences, also working with Brett and everything, what's the best way to kind of like dissect the tape or learn the tape and then scouting players to kind of forge their way into what you're doing? Because I know you got a late start in in this, and then you're very, very successful with your partnership with Brett Coleman, and obviously meeting the right people certainly makes it a lot easier. But I also write online about the Bears and the New York Giants now as a way of kind of putting myself out there, even though I don't have any background in playing football like you did as well. What is your best advice for people, whether it's like me or anybody else who's watching this, if they have a son or daughter who wants to break into this industry, and obviously time and patience is certainly required for something like this?
I think it's required for pretty much anything, but it's a great question. I get asked it a lot. I think you have to find something that you're passionate about and think that you can build some value with. And in the beginning, I don't think you know what that is. Yeah. Like, I don't think anybody knows what that is. And there are a lot of opportunities to figure that out. And some of the most valuable opportunities are figuring out, I don't want any part of this, right? Because sports business, or even sports media, which is a small slice of sports business, has so many different touch points, skill sets. I mean, you can do video, you can edit, you can write, you can do production stuff online or for television or for radio. You can be a guest booker for, your local radio station. You can do stat work for your local high school team. I guarantee if you go down to your local high school team and you're not in like Texas or Pennsylvania, it's not a 5A like state championship high school team, like they will take your help and you can do just about anything. And many folks I know that reach out to me are currently like grad assistants in college. They, again, don't have, football playing experience or lower level football playing experience, but they know they want to be in the sport. And they just sort of volunteer for their college team, and they go and they do stats, or they do charting, or they do film work, or they do whatever the college team needs. It's a great way to get started. It's a great way to start making connections. And you can do work on that. There's so many resources available now to people that want to start out, for learning the game, for schemes, for terminology. There is books. There are a million videos on YouTube, coach videos on YouTube, anything you want to learn, offensive line, defensive line, coverage schemes, passing progressions. It's all there. Like, you just have to find what you're really interested in. And that would probably be my one biggest takeaway, is make sure that you love it. And I mean, love it to the point where when you think you hate it, you're going to keep going. Because I got asked actually when I was speaking in front of that business class, and one of the students said, did you ever think about quitting over the last 10, 12 years? And I looked to the leader of the business program who invited me there, and I know Alan pretty well. And I said, can I swear? He said, yeah. And I said, a shitload of times, like probably 2 or 3 times a year. And I think people are maybe surprised to hear that, but it is a very difficult thing to do. It takes a ton of discipline to sit down here in a basement by yourself for 3 or 4 months a year, basically kind of lock yourself off from your friends and your family, and forego things like birthday parties and whatever else, and just focus on something that's making you no money. It's very self-centered, if you want to say that, or self-interested. And it also is very, very difficult. And there are many times I was like, what are you doing? You're not making any money. You don't know where this is going. You don't even really know if you're any good at it. Like, why are you so committed to doing this? Because you have to have that commitment. And the bottom line was always the same as it is now. I love it. Like, I just plain old love it. Like, it never started out to be a money thing. I definitely never wanted to be on camera. That was a huge step. I don't really think I think I have a voice better built for radio than video, but it was never the thing to do this. This was never the end. And I think if you start with this as the end, and so many people do, I want to start a YouTube channel. I want to monetize it. I want to make money. I want to, and boy, I don't know. You better love it a lot if that's what you think you're going to do, because it is very difficult to get that done. It's not impossible. Nothing's impossible, but you better love it. And when this journey takes turns, and mine's taken many and continues to take some really wild turns, you better be committed to sticking with it to the point where I just dig doing it. I don't really care how, like, I'm just going to keep doing it because I love doing it. And if you don't have that, you're probably going to end up doing something else, and that's okay too.
But I got to tell you, EJ, I turned 47 in March, and I just started this writing stuff only a couple of years. I'm less than 2 years in it, and still, I sometimes ask myself, "What am I doing?"
Yep. Everybody does. Know that everybody asks that question. I don't care who they are. Like, I now am lucky enough to get to talk to some of the most successful people in the industry.
Exactly.
Everybody says that. And I mean everybody. And if they tell you that they don't, they're lying.
No. I think it's an inspiration. Even I have a full-time job, and even at my age, sometimes I wonder, I sometimes think about, I could be doing something more, or at least I could be something that I like. That I'm passionate about, and I won't lie to you. I do find myself, career-wise, I might have hit a ceiling, or I'm at a crossroads right now.
For sure.
This conversation was very, very inspirational and meaningful. At least you have to kind of keep loving it and grinding it. Certainly, it's not for the money, but in your case, you and Brett really, really hustled and got to where you are right now. And it certainly took a lot of time to get for you and him to get to where you are right now, to be able to do this full time and talk to the people in the industry that is well known and respected. And for me, at least, to be able to do this with my normal co-host, Ken Fang from Awful Announcing, and then having to do this, and then have you come on to this, small show, it really, really means a lot to me. And, now that the draft is over, I understand you're going to be on vacation starting tomorrow. So
yes, indeed.
well,
Yes,
you truly
indeed.
deserve a break. And I will say this as a draft fan from all of us, I really appreciate what you and Brett and other small, independent evaluators do for us. And, I hope that you will continue to have a successful career, and that I would love to have you, and hopefully, have Brett again in a few weeks or a few months as we get closer to the season. And then, congratulations on another wonderful year, draft week completed, EJ, and thank you so much. And I look forward to having you on again in the near future.
I really appreciate it, Steven. I love that we got to connect and take the opportunity. I was in your chair not very long ago, like literally not very long ago. And I remember the feeling, and I never want to be the guy that's like, I'm too busy, I can't. Sometimes that's the case, but yes. I always want to come back on those because I still feel that way. Like when we, grab a guest that is well above our level, in terms of success or notoriety or just experience and expertise, I still get that feeling of like, oh man, they're coming on our show. It's so cool. And the fact that people see me sometimes that way as a guest now is a real flip from my head, but I never want to be the guy that says no when I don't have to. I always want to say yes if I can. So thank you very much for keeping with it, and for having me on.
Thank you, EJ, and enjoy your vacation. And we look forward to us speaking again very, very soon. Have a wonderful time, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Take care.
Take care.